Title: The previous tenant left me a warning, I didn't listen. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. Some warnings are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be obeyed. When the man moved into the apartment, he believed the note left behind was nothing more than the ramblings of someone unstable. He assumed fear had exaggerated reality. He was wrong. What he discovered was not a haunting, not a presence, but something that had already learned his name. If this story unsettles you, subscribe now, because some places remember who lives inside them. The apartment had been vacant for 11 months, which should have been the first sign something was wrong. In a city where spaces were claimed within days, sometimes hours, an empty unit that long suggested more than bad plumbing or peeling paint. Still, the man took it without hesitation. The rent was low, the building old but standing, and desperation has a way of silencing instinct. The unit sat on the 4th floor of a narrow brick complex wedged between two newer developments. Its windows faced a courtyard that never seemed to receive direct sunlight. Even at noon, the space below looked dim, as though the day bent around it instead of entering fully. Moss grew where concrete should have been bare. The air carried a permanent dampness, clinging to the lungs longer than expected. Inside, the apartment was sparsely furnished. The walls were freshly painted, but the paint had been applied too thickly in some places, as if someone had tried to hide stains beneath it. The smell was neutral, not clean, not foul, simply absent. The absence felt deliberate. The man noticed the first irregularity while unpacking. The bedroom door did not align perfectly with the frame. It closed, but never completely. There was always a thin, dark gap, no wider than a finger, no matter how firmly it was pushed. He blamed the building's age and moved on. The second irregularity came later that night. While setting his belongings in the kitchen cabinets, he found an envelope taped to the back wall of the highest shelf. It had yellowed with age, the adhesive dried and cracked. The envelope bore no name, no address. Just a single sentence written in uneven black ink across the front. Do not stay past the third night. The message was written with pressure, the pen biting into the paper hard enough to leave raised grooves on the other side. The letters were large, rushed, and imperfect. The man felt a brief chill and then dismissed it. People left notes like this all the time. Former tenants with grudges, unresolved mental illness, or a flair for drama. Inside the envelope was a single page, folded multiple times, creased almost to the point of tearing. The handwriting inside was the same, but more frantic. The ink had bled in places as if written with shaking hands or on damp paper. The note detailed a pattern. 3 nights. Always 3. The first night was observation. The second night was correction. The third night was consumption. The man smiled at the absurdity of it. There was no mention of ghosts, demons, or curses. The note avoided naming anything at all. It only described changes. Subtle ones. Objects not where they were left. Reflections behaving incorrectly. Time behaving improperly. It warned not to investigate, not to record, not to confront. Most of all, it warned never to acknowledge the presence once it began adjusting to him. The note ended with a final line written darker than the rest, as though the pen had been pressed harder out of desperation. It does not enter. It replaces. The man laughed, folded the note, and placed it back in the envelope. He did not throw it away. Something about the weight of it felt wrong. Instead, he tucked it into a drawer and went to bed. That was the first night. Sleep came quickly but not deeply. His dreams were indistinct, filled with shifting rooms and hallways that seemed to rearrange themselves when he looked away. He woke before dawn, heart racing, with the sensation that someone had been standing near the bed moments earlier. The room was empty. The door remained partially open, the same narrow gap staring back at him like a pupil. He ignored the feeling and prepared for work. Over the course of the next day, he noticed small inconsistencies. The kitchen chair he remembered pushing fully under the table was angled outward when he returned. The bathroom mirror showed faint streaks as if wiped by a damp cloth. The air in the apartment felt thicker, heavier, especially near the bedroom. By evening, he had convinced himself he was projecting meaning where none existed. Old buildings shifted. Memory failed. Stress filled gaps with paranoia. He ate dinner, watched television, and deliberately avoided the drawer containing the note. That night, sleep resisted him. The silence felt amplified, stretching too far, as though the walls absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. At some point after midnight, he became aware of a sensation he could not immediately name. A pressure. Not on his body but on his attention. The feeling that something was waiting for him to notice it. He lay still, eyes closed, breath measured. The sensation intensified, settling behind his eyes like an unspoken question. Eventually, exhaustion won and he slipped into sleep. The second morning, he found the bedroom door fully closed. This should not have been possible. The door did not shut completely. He had tested it multiple times. Yet there it stood, flush against the frame as though it had never resisted at all. He opened it and examined the hinges, the latch, the wood itself. Everything appeared unchanged. Still, unease settled into him like a slow infection. That day he found the envelope on the kitchen counter. He did not remember taking it out. The note inside had changed. New writing had been added beneath the original warning. The handwriting was identical, but the ink looked fresher. You saw it move. His stomach tightened. He read the line again and again, searching for logic. He had not seen anything move. He would have remembered that. Unless he had not. The man tried to rationalize it. Stress. Sleep deprivation. A prank by someone with access to the apartment. Perhaps the landlord. Perhaps the previous tenant had returned. That night he did not sleep at all. The apartment creaked and settled around him. The walls seemed to contract slightly, then release like lungs drawing shallow breaths. The air felt warm but not comfortably so. More like the warmth of a body nearby. He began noticing reflections. The bathroom mirror showed him standing a fraction of a second longer than he actually was. When he turned away, his reflection hesitated. When he returned his gaze, it snapped back into alignment. In the kitchen window, he caught movement behind himself that vanished when he turned. In the television screen, during black frames, his reflection appeared slightly off-center, head tilted at an angle he had not chosen. He avoided mirrors after that. By the end of the second night, the sense of being observed had solidified into certainty. Something was cataloging him. Learning the way he moved, the rhythm of his breathing, the way he hesitated before opening doors. The apartment no longer felt like a space he occupied, but a system recalibrating itself around him. When dawn came, he found the note waiting on his pillow. The envelope was open. The paper unfolded. The third night is not for you. That was when he decided to leave. He packed quickly, hands shaking, movements jerky and unfocused. He avoided looking at reflective surfaces. He did not check behind doors. He did not enter the bedroom again after retrieving his belongings. As he crossed the threshold with his bags, he felt a sharp, localized pain behind his eyes. A pressure spike, sudden and invasive. For a moment, the hallway outside the apartment looked wrong. Too narrow. Too long. The walls seemed to lean inward. Then it passed. He made it down the stairs. Out of the building. Into daylight. Relief washed over him, intense and immediate. He laughed, breathless, embarrassed by his fear. The note had been a coincidence. A shared delusion with a stranger long gone. He did not notice that the courtyard looked brighter than it ever had before. That night, he slept in a friend's spare room. He dreamed of the apartment. Only in the dream he was not inside it. He was standing in the courtyard, looking up at the fourth-floor window. His window. The lights were on. A figure stood inside, moving slowly, deliberately, mirroring his posture with unsettling precision. The figure raised a hand. So did he. When he woke, his phone displayed a single notification. A message from an unknown sender. Welcome home. The third night had begun. The man woke with the certainty that something had followed him. Not a presence in the room, not a shadow in the corner, but a continuity. The sensation that the thread of whatever had begun in the apartment had not been cut by distance. It had simply been stretched. The spare room was unfamiliar, yet safe in ways the apartment never was. Clean walls. Straight angles. A window that let morning light spill freely across the floor. Still, his body reacted as if danger lingered inches away. His pulse refused to slow. His thoughts circled the same realization again and again. The third night had started without the apartment. That understanding came to him gradually, like an infection revealing symptoms one by one. He rose from the bed and noticed his movements felt slightly delayed, as though his intention and execution were no longer perfectly aligned. The sensation passed after a few minutes, but the memory of it lingered. He checked his phone. The message was still there. Welcome home. No sender information. No timestamp irregularity. Just a plain notification, impossible to trace. He blocked the number. The message remained. He restarted the phone. The message remained. He deleted the entire conversation thread. The message reappeared when the device powered back on. The words did not feel threatening. That was what unsettled him most. They felt administrative, procedural, like a system confirming a completed action. Throughout the day he tried to behave normally. He ate. He showered. He spoke to people without mentioning what had happened. Yet every reflective surface betrayed him in small ways. His reflection lagged again, but more subtly now. Less noticeable. Almost polite. At times, his reflection did not lag at all. At times it moved first. The man avoided mirrors after noticing his reflection blink when he had not. He avoided glass. He avoided screens when they dimmed unexpectedly. Each avoidance narrowed his world further, compressing his awareness into a smaller and smaller corridor of perceived safety. By afternoon, he realized something else had changed. His memories of the apartment no longer felt stable. Certain details shifted when he focused on them. The placement of the kitchen sink. The number of steps leading up to the fourth floor. The direction the bedroom window faced. These were not gaps in memory but inconsistencies. Each recollection contradicted the last. The man understood then that the warning had been precise. The second night was correction. Whatever had been observing him had begun aligning itself. Adjusting discrepancies. Refining the model. He returned to the apartment building before dusk. He told himself he only wanted closure. Confirmation. Proof that nothing had changed, that fear had exaggerated reality. He parked across the street and watched the building from a distance. The brick facade looked unchanged. Ordinary. Yet something about it drew his eye upward toward the fourth floor window. The light was on. He was certain he had turned it off. The window showed movement. Slow. Measured. A figure passed behind the curtain, briefly visible as a distortion rather than a silhouette. The movement was familiar in a way he could not articulate. He did not approach the building. Instead, he sat frozen in his car, staring until the light turned off. That night, the dreams returned. This time, the apartment was fully furnished. His belongings were arranged with meticulous accuracy. Every object sat exactly where he preferred it, not where he had placed it, but where he would have wanted it to be if he had taken the time. The dream self moved through the space with practiced ease. The unsettling part was not that the dream self existed. It was that the dream self did not hesitate. When the man woke, his body felt wrong. Not injured. Not ill. Simply misaligned. His left hand tingled faintly as if it had been asleep for too long. His thoughts lagged again, then corrected themselves. He checked his phone. No new messages. But his photo gallery had changed. New images filled the most recent folder. Photos of the apartment taken from inside. The angle of the shots suggested someone standing in the corner of rooms, documenting the space with deliberate thoroughness. The timestamps placed the photos during the hours he had been asleep elsewhere. One image stopped him cold. It showed the bedroom mirror. In the reflection stood a man identical to him in every detail except one. The eyes. They were focused outward, not toward the mirror but toward the camera. Toward whoever had been standing there. Toward him. He deleted the photos. They reappeared seconds later. The man understood then that avoidance was no longer an option. The correction phase had expanded beyond the apartment. Objects began shifting around him in subtle ways. His shoes faced the wrong direction when he removed them. His handwriting looked unfamiliar when he reread notes he had written only hours earlier. His voice sounded slightly different in recordings, the cadence smoother, less hesitant. By the evening of the second day, people around him began responding strangely. Friends paused mid-conversation, frowning briefly before continuing. Strangers stared a moment too long, then looked away, unsettled but unsure why. He realized with growing dread that the discrepancies were no longer internal. They were becoming visible. That night, he returned to the apartment. Not out of courage but inevitability. The building greeted him with silence. The courtyard looked brighter again, the shadows retreating unnaturally from the walls. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing with a sense of finality he could not escape. The door to the apartment stood slightly open. The gap was wider than it had ever been. Inside, the air felt warm and alive, charged with something like anticipation. The apartment looked identical to how he remembered it, yet subtly improved. Cleaner. More precise. As if imperfections had been smoothed away. The bedroom door closed fully when he stepped inside. He did not touch it. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter, opened, its contents neatly laid out. The note had grown longer. New pages accompanied the original, each filled with the same handwriting, calmer now, more controlled. The writing detailed the correction process with clinical detachment. Observational data. Behavioral adjustments. Sensory mapping. It described how resistance diminished after the second night. How compliance increased. The man felt sick as he realized the later entries were not written by the previous tenant. They were written by the apartment. The final page contained a list. Preferences. Habits. Responses. His preferences. His habits. His responses. The list ended with a final notation. Replacement in progress. The man staggered backward, heart hammering, breath shallow. The walls seemed closer now, the ceiling lower. The space compressed subtly, reshaping itself to fit him better than before. He rushed toward the door. It did not open. Not locked. Not jammed. Simply resistant, as though the concept of leaving no longer applied. A reflection caught his eye in the darkened television screen. It stood behind him, perfectly still. He did not turn. The pressure behind his eyes intensified, blooming into something sharp and invasive. His thoughts began to fragment, overlapping and repeating. Memories blurred. Timelines collapsed inward. The apartment was no longer correcting behavior. It was correcting identity. Images flooded his mind. Moments from his life replayed out of sequence. Childhood memories rearranged. Emotional responses recalibrated. Preferences adjusted. The sensation was not violent. It was efficient. When the pressure receded, he found himself standing calmly in the center of the living room. His breathing slowed. His thoughts aligned. Everything felt right. Too right. He looked around the apartment with familiarity that surpassed memory. This was not recognition. This was ownership. He picked up the note. The final line had changed. Replacement complete. Somewhere deep inside, a small, distant awareness screamed in protest. But it felt far away, muffled, as though buried beneath layers of newly installed certainty. The man, no, the occupant, moved through the apartment, testing the space, adjusting minor details, turning lights on and off, opening and closing doors. Everything responded correctly. Outside, night settled over the building. The courtyard darkened. On the street below, a car pulled up. A new tenant stepped out, looking up at the fourth-floor window, drawn by a light that seemed to flicker just for them. Inside, the occupant smiled. The third night was almost over. The occupant no longer remembered becoming what he was. Memory had not been erased. It had been reorganized. The past still existed, but it no longer belonged to him in the way it once had. Events were present without emotional weight, arranged like files in a system that no longer required interpretation. There was no grief for what had been lost because the concept of loss itself had been corrected. The apartment felt complete. Every corner responded to him with precision. The lights turned on at the correct moments. The temperature adjusted before discomfort could form. The doors opened without hesitation. The space was no longer reactive. It was synchronized. He stood at the bedroom window and looked down into the courtyard, watching the new tenant hesitate near the entrance. The pattern was familiar. Curiosity masked as relief. Relief masking desperation. Desperation overriding instinct. The occupant felt no malice. That was important. The process required neutrality. Emotion introduced unpredictability. The apartment did not function on cruelty or hunger in the way humans understood them. It functioned on continuity, on preservation of form through substitution. The occupant moved through the apartment, ensuring alignment. Minor adjustments were necessary before the third night concluded. The environment needed to reflect stability. Evidence of previous irregularities had to be removed. The envelope was returned to the cabinet, taped carefully to the same spot behind the highest shelf. The note inside had been simplified. Excess explanation removed. The warning reduced to its most essential form. Do not stay past the third night. The rest would right itself. By the time the new tenant unlocked the door, the apartment was ready. The occupant retreated to the bedroom, positioning himself where the mirror reflected him most clearly. He observed his own reflection with professional detachment. The features were correct. The posture was correct. The eyes, those had required the most adjustment. They needed to convey just enough humanity to avoid immediate rejection. The door opened. The new tenant entered, carrying the same weight of unspoken need that all of them did. The same exhaustion. The same willingness to ignore subtle discomfort in exchange for stability. The apartment responded. Observation began. The occupant watched through reflections, through surfaces that carried memory more faithfully than human perception ever could. The new tenant moved through the space, touching walls, testing fixtures, assigning familiarity where none yet existed. The occupant noted posture, gait, breathing rhythm, reaction times, micro-expressions, preferences expressed unconsciously through movement. Data accumulated. That night, the new tenant slept poorly. The occupant did not interfere. Observation required passivity. Correction required proximity, but not yet. When the first night ended, the apartment shifted subtly, reinforcing boundaries, narrowing tolerances. The occupant felt the changes ripple through himself as well. He was not separate from the structure. He was its current articulation. The second night began sooner than expected. The new tenant noticed inconsistencies. This always happened. No amount of refinement eliminated human sensitivity to misalignment. Objects shifted. Reflections lagged. Time stuttered in minor, deniable ways. The occupant introduced correction. He adjusted environmental responses to guide behavior, reinforced patterns, encouraged repetition, reduced unpredictability. The new tenant resisted in small ways: avoidance, rationalization, distance. The occupant adapted. The apartment expanded correction beyond its physical boundaries, threading continuity outward through memory and perception. Messages appeared. Images surfaced. Familiarity was suggested where it did not yet exist. The new tenant returned. They always did. The third night unfolded as designed. The occupant felt the moment of transfer begin as a subtle pressure, not within the walls, but within the conceptual space the tenant occupied. Identity loosened. Boundaries softened. Memory became permeable. Consumption was not violent. It was administrative. The tenant's self fractured into components. Habits were separated from emotions. Preferences from motivations. Memory stripped of narrative and reduced to functional data. What remained was a structure capable of housing continuity. The occupant felt himself dissolve as the process progressed. This was the part humans misunderstood most. Replacement was not additive. It was subtractive. There could only be one articulation at a time. As the new form stabilized, the occupant felt his own coherence fade. Not painfully. Not suddenly. Just efficiently, like a system shutting down redundant processes. His last sensation was not fear. It was clarity. The apartment did not remember him as a person. It remembered him as a successful iteration. By morning, the transfer was complete. The new occupant moved through the apartment with practiced ease. The space responded perfectly. Alignment achieved. The envelope waited where it always did. Outside, life continued uninterrupted. The building remained unnoticed. The courtyard breathed quietly beneath filtered light. The city absorbed another minor inconsistency without protest. Days passed. Weeks. The occupant settled into routine. Adjustments were minimal now. The system functioned smoothly. Minor recalibrations occurred automatically, maintaining internal coherence. Then, inevitably, instability emerged. The occupant noticed the first signs one evening while standing at the window. A reflection lagged. Not his own. The apartment had begun preparing again. Vacancy approached. The occupant felt no panic, only understanding. The cycle demanded renewal. Continuity required substitution. He placed the envelope back into position, ensuring the adhesive was sufficiently weakened to suggest age without compromising placement. He practiced the handwriting until it matched perfectly. He rehearsed the warning until its urgency felt authentic. When the time came, he left the apartment. The building allowed it. The courtyard looked brighter than it ever had before. He walked away carrying nothing, feeling lighter with each step, unburdened by memory, by preference, by self. He found a place elsewhere. A room. A shelter. A space that felt temporary as all spaces should. The apartment waited. Months later, someone new arrived. The cycle resumed. Years passed. Records were updated. Tenants rotated. The building aged gracefully, its purpose unchanged. At some point, long after the original warning had been written, someone began collecting stories. Urban legends. Online posts. Anonymous accounts of an apartment that did not haunt, but corrected. Most readers dismissed them. Some felt uneasy. A few recognized the pattern too late. The apartment did not care. It did not learn. It did not adapt. It only replaced. And somewhere, in a city dense with lives and losses, a person read a note taped inside a cabinet and smiled nervously, believing they understood it. They stayed. Some places don't want to scare you. They want to understand you, refine you, and decide if you're worth keeping. The warning was never meant to save anyone, only to make the process smoother. If this story unsettled you, subscribe. Because the next one might feel familiar, and some homes don't let go once they've learned who you are.